Welcome back to Leading Safe and Respectful Workplaces. I'm your host, Kelsey Pask. Today we're exploring psychological safety, a concept that has gained significant attention but is often misunderstood. Psychological safety isn't just about being comfortable or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about creating environments where people can take interpersonal risks, speak up about problems, and be authentic without fear of punishment or humiliation. This matters deeply for preventing workplace harassment because when people don't feel psychologically safe, they're less likely to report problems, less likely to intervene when they witness harm, and more likely to tolerate inappropriate behaviour. I'm delighted to be joined by Jen Weidman. Jen is a queer, feminist, family violence specialist and mental health social worker and director of Therapies. She runs a small private practice and develops online programs for health, helping workers and leaders who are afraid of losing themselves in the work and burning out. She has also developed therapy cards as an accessible product that workers, leaders, and teams can utilise to engage in critical reflective practice as a tool for increasing worker wellbeing and their own self-care. Welcome, Jen. So welcome, Jen. It's so wonderful to have you here, and I really appreciate you giving us your time and your insights.
Thank you.
Yeah, to get things started, really keen to hear what does psychological safety look like in a workplace, especially for a person from a marginalised background.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so exciting to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Look, psychological safety is not just about speaking up, but it's about feeling safe to exist fully,
yes,
as you are. And so for someone from a marginalised background, that safety isn't really always the default. And so often there's a scanning of safety in quite a vigilant way. And it's really about, can I show up as myself fully here and not have to shrink, code switch, or perform resilience in order to be met as I am, and to be valued.
Yes.
Yeah. And so often for folks from a marginalised background, there is a lot of that shape-shifting sometimes. There's this really interesting theory around belonging uncertainty, and it's exactly how it sounds. It's like feeling uncertain about, do I really belong here?
Yeah.
And it's disproportionately felt by those from marginalised backgrounds. And in the workplace, that turns up as well.
Yeah.
So psychological safety in a workplace is when those in leadership don't assume sameness. There's room made for diversity. When voices are quiet or ideas are overlooked, that leaders are aware, they become aware of those things. Workplaces making space for folks to turn up as they are without, also here's the nuance, right? Like without putting a spotlight on it either.
Yes.
Right? So this kind of balance of we welcome and we embrace and we celebrate a whole bunch of diversity, but without a sense of being targeting either. So, no magic script or wand, but that's the balance that we need to create. And it's more than just policy talk. So it's actually this kind of real world, experiential sense of safety in the workplace.
I think, there's a couple of points there that are so helpful to unpack that spotlight as soon as it's, I think sometimes when people are wanting to celebrate diversity and difference, yes, they can perhaps go a little bit far on the spectrum, and it's like, okay, let's, profile this and focus in on, and especially in organisations where there perhaps are, one or two people from, marginalised backgrounds, that spotlight can just exacerbate perhaps their sense of, even though it's in an attempt to be welcoming, to be inclusive, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So thank you for mentioning that. And the policy piece too. I think there's so much that's done to kind of get the drafting and the language right in policies. And when I work with organisations, I really try and shift focus to the implementation, because that's what, irrespective of what's written down on paper, that's not how people experience and show up or experience their day to day in the job. It's whether or not people can actually live those values and implement those policies. So references to psychological safety are being more and more common, similarly to, trauma-informed, being intersectional and stuff. And it's great that there's, I guess, increased awareness of some of these terms. But yes, now we need to kind of do a little bit more work around how do we upskill people to make sure that they can implement these things and, enable people to kind of feel as though they don't have to code switch. I'm so pleased you also mentioned that, because it's not a term that people are particularly familiar with, or recognise that actually that might be what's happening, and it takes a lot of energy.
It takes so much energy.
Yeah, for and you work with lots of people with lived experience. Is there any insight there that perhaps you want to talk about in terms of the code switching nature?
Thank you. And it turns up a lot in, like I said, marginalised communities, but particularly also, visibly presenting differently, I suppose, and queer communities, and folks with lived experience. So this idea of masking a little bit, and this blending, where creatures designed for connection, and so there's this group thing, belonging that tribes are formed in and with. And so if I can just kind of match whatever you're doing, or however the dominant kind of group is presenting in a workplace, that would be like, are we all making comments in a meeting? How is this? How are the bodies kind of turning up? And when the body does this, are they going to be more listened to or respected? And so in that way, it can be really subtle.
Yes.
But if you're marginalised, any of the kind of intersectionalities that we have in the world, that if you're doing that all day, every day in your workplace or wherever you're working, it's exhausting. Mm-hmm. The toll is invisible. It's one of the invisible, tiresome layers of existing in a workplace.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's really difficult to kind of put your hand up and be like, oh, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm code switching right now. So how do people become aware of it unless we all do the work to learn about it?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. Really keen to understand, sometimes workplaces take the assumption that, trust exists everywhere, and, it's a key principle to trauma-informed practice, and really core to creating a psychologically safe environment. But if, as a workplace leader, how can you rebuild trust when it's been broken by experiences of harassment and discrimination?
It's such an important question. I'm so glad it's here. Trust in a workplace and rebuilding trust in a workplace is almost essentially no different to trust being rebuilt in the personal space, intimate relationship. It is not through the formal and the memos and the emails, although great, that's a percentage, but it's through consistent relational repair. So it's really, the emphasis is on the relational component and turning up consistently. So whether harm is through big overt harassments or microaggressions, leaders really need to repair the trust. Leaders really need to hold accountability and take ownership and acknowledge the harm directly and not skirting around it and minimizing it or shifting the blame thing. It's kind of very simple and clear cut.
Yeah.
That carries a lot of weight. Taking transparent action. So meaning what you say and following through with it and being congruent there, being consistent, having your words match your actions, showing what's changing, showing who's going to do what steps, laying it out, and then having to do it.
Yes.
To walk the talk for every single individual leader or person in leadership to do your part, to do the practice, to even go away and do your work on your own self-critical reflection.
Yes.
And come back and with a greater sense of self-awareness. This is showing that is a demonstration that you are taking this seriously as an individual, and then you bring that gift back to the workplace. Leaders can invite feedback, but without defensiveness. So without jumping into the need to explain but I was just just listen. Yes, to invite feedback and close your mouth. This interesting piece around the person who's been harmed also doesn't owe you their trust back.
Yes.
Yeah, so they can choose whether or not to trust again, and allowing that, so that can be challenging. And then also, I guess, just an invitation for the person or people who have been harmed or where trust has been broken, if they would like to have involvement in the next steps of change or repair, but without this sense of pressure or obligation that the person who's been wronged or harmed then now has to be responsible for the fixing.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's kind of a doubling down that we definitely don't want to be doing.
No, absolutely.
So lots of choice in that and respecting choice.
Yeah, I think I really appreciated what you said about not respecting that trust doesn't need to be provided, by the person that's been harmed in that context. I think I'd just, like to add that irrespective of whether or not that person, has that, chooses to trust the organisation again, the work needs to still be done. That choice at the end of the day at that interpersonal level needs to be there. But most of the time where there's a lack of trust in an organisation, it's occurring on quite a few levels. It's often not just one-off incidents. And so if you're aware of something that's and you're responding and trying to address kind of that example of where trust has been broken, that's great. Again, manage your own expectations that person doesn't have to, or pander to you and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much. That might come. And if it does, that's great. But that work still needs to be done. And it can, as a leader, be a thankless task. But what we know from evidence is that when we have psychologically safe environments, we know people show up, perform better, contribute better, like productivity and sometimes the bottom line is met in those environments. So the investment on your part to rebuild trust is not wasted time.
No, absolutely.
It's actually core to your business, your strategic planning at the end of the day. It also, helps at that interpersonal and relational perspective.
Absolutely. And leadership and the workplaces to accommodate that will take time. Yeah, the humility and the time factor to consistently demonstrate repair is here. Repair is here. We're working on it. Can you bear with us? And this kind of mutual, the desire for mutual reconnection.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think sometimes there is that knee-jerk reaction that it's like, okay, well, we need to repair things and, by the end of next week, it's all going to be done.
Yeah. Come on now, let's repair.
Yeah. Not realistic at all. I think some of the most powerful examples of and a process that we introduced at University College London when I was working was environmental kind of investigations. So, if we received quite a few anonymous reports from teams or departments, to say that there was a really toxic kind of environment, then we could trigger this process like a cultural audit that could connect into lots of even disciplinary procedures. But I don't know why I'm calling it my favourite part, But
Okay.
I think the part that I was really keen to work with to make sure that the implementation was effective was that we provided updates to the whole of the community in that team, and to say and we were really open and transparent. Actually, we've seen 13 anonymous reports of bullying, 12 of discrimination, in this 3-month period. And, we've heard these are the types of themes that are coming up. This is not okay. Where, there's support if people are impacted, but here's what we're going to do to respond to that need. And again, please bear with us as we start to try and uncover things. But we found that it gave people a greater sense of safety to kind of participate in any future processes. And I think that transparency at the start was really key to say, look, we actually, we've heard you. Because sometimes people can feel like all of that feedback, if it's there, or those opportunities to provide feedback, it just ends up somewhere in the ether and is never acted on.
You might have spoken about this already, but the idea from Jennifer Freyd of institutional betrayal versus institutional courage.
Yes.
And, in a nutshell, it's just, when we're harmed in the workplace, an institution or a workplace, that is a place in which we depend on them for something. So, income at least.
Yes.
Let alone a place of, some kind of care. And then there's harm in that. It's like, it's a different kind of fracture.
Yes.
Yeah. Because of the nature of how you're engaged. And then I guess then moving into how is trust rebuilt is through this really lots of courageous acts from that same workplace. And on, micro to the macro level, this kind of personal stuff, and then here are the big changes that we're invested in making.
Yes. Yeah, no, great point. Thank you.
Interesting stuff.
Can you share a little bit about what are some of the most common leadership behaviours that you've seen or come across that accidentally undermine safety for employees?
Yeah, I mean, it's so, this to me just brings in the humanity of it as well, because leaders are also humans.
Yes.
Yes, Flash. And so, and yet are in a position of authority and responsibility. And so there can be very accidental, well-intentioned behaviours that can still cause harm. So I'm so glad this is here, because it almost is this counter conversation to why a leader might pop into defensiveness. Yes. I was only just trying to, we're just kind of being human.
Yes.
So some of the things that I've heard and seen are over-promising safety. So this whole, you can tell me anything, I'm here for anything, anytime, like it's kind of really big promises without the nuance. Folks, especially with lived experiences or marginalised backgrounds, really often need to see some scaffolding there first and a demonstration over time. Leaders may also end up avoiding hard conversations because many humans do. And so even as a leader, that can be scary. And what support are they or their workplace giving them to engage in that? And that could even look like avoiding meetings or delaying email responses, letting topics slide off agendas, going to approach someone when you kind of know they're already leaving for the day. These kind of really subtle avoidance behaviours that even, leaders may not be cognizant of either. The idea about performing care instead of practicing it, which means just talking about well-being while not addressing other factors like giant workloads that impact care well-being. So those kind of workplace practices, they send messages about, are we safe here or not as well?
Yes.
This one I kind of really find quite interesting is micromanaging or rescuing staff from their discomfort. So, which can actually really feel disempowering for lived experience workers and folks from marginalised backgrounds in particular. It's not a pleasant experience, really, is it? But it could also just turn up so simply in saying things to make people feel comfortable and safe, or saying something to a different person as well, just to kind of keep them happy. And if workers get wind of that discrepancy, well, how come I got told this but you got told that? It breeds uncertainty. Yeah. This one is really important, thinking that they know. So assuming that they get it from a victim survivor or lived experience worker or another person's point of view. We can all get it to a certain degree.
Of course.
Yeah, but not assuming that that they're always going to deeply understand. Colluding with the unsafe behaviour. So, yeah. And really accidentally too. Like, again, it's like, unless we're getting ourselves checked out with one-on-one or peer supervision or leadership support, we have to check ourselves out as well. That sends a huge message of I'm not safe. And then the subtlety about judgment, so linked in with checking yourself out and exploring your own stories and biases. The subtlety about judgment about a worker's choice that could turn up on your facial expression or your pursed lips, the disrespectful body cues, eye rolls, at an extreme.
Yep.
All of those things undermine safety. People with lived experience, like we said before, are somewhat, heightened. It can be, that kind of threat detection system that lives in all of us. It is kind of, a bit more closer to the surface even.
Yes.
Around scanning for those cues. And if detected, stories can get made about this place isn't safe for me anymore. So leaders have a big role in that. It's these everyday misattunements. It's being willing to, for leaders to, being willing to check themselves out regularly without shaming either.
Yes.
So it's kind of a healthy self-reflection and healthy self-awareness, delicately, with encouragement like you're trying as well, and getting the right support for their level of leadership, I think, is really important for that. One of the things that, just to wrap that part up, is accidental gaslighting in a workplace. It's a really commonly spoken about term more and more, which is fabulous.
Yes.
But it stands in opposition to this strong line of believing a person when they come forward about something. And so, this kind of accidental, are you sure that really happened? Or they wouldn't do that. This kind of language can leak out accidentally.
Oh, I've known that person for such a long time. Never seen them. They would never. Yeah. That really surprises me because,
I've never mentioned that before. Yeah. And those are really common, easy things to kind of fall out of our mouths if we're not careful checking.
I think the self-reflection or reflective practice in any context is something that's often overlooked. And I know, lots of people feel strapped for time, strapped for a resource, all of those types of things. But I think the really powerful, leadership moments, but also the organisations that, are doing this, well, in some aspects, are recognising the importance of that and kind of building in, moments and everyone, well, most people have professional development opportunities or opportunities to come together as a team or as a workplace. And, if there's inviting feedback is part of that. But then also, role modeling that self-reflective practice and actually being open about when you've made mistakes. Mistakes are going to happen. We have to acknowledge that they will happen. We're not perfect beings. And it's okay, but it's how we respond to that, and it's how we learn from that is going to be the marker of whether or not we can, either rebuild trust or build trust or rebuild trust or provide a safer environment. So as you were talking about the ability to self-reflect, I think some people, a lot of leaders that I've worked with feel really nervous about that, and I actually spend so much time, there's so much value in actually having a lot of coaching conversations. So if someone's going in to have a difficult conversation, they know this, okay, let's talk through, how you might approach it. Sometimes receiving a disclosure can come out of nowhere, especially if you're not in kind of a frontline services role. I found it interesting about I'm a relatively new parent, and reading all about kind of regulating your behaviours in order to kind of provide that sense of calm for your child who's navigating that space. And that's transferable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And, it's that moment before you say, oh, that person's never, I've never heard this before. It's that moment of, okay, am I present enough here? Just a couple of seconds to kind of regroup and go, right, I need to focus on what's being said and how they're expressing themselves, and let me pick up on some of their body language so that, right, I can try and adapt. And that's hard, and it's a skill to be practiced over time.
It's hard, but it's what's required. It's, the more we can do it, the better. The power of pause. It's really in the personal moments, this kind of micro moments that we can not to put pressure on it, but can make or break. Kind of a moment of trust.
Exactly.
Experience of safety.
Yes, and it's hard to walk that balance of not putting too much pressure on it, but it does shape those things. We have to be cognizant that everyone's bringing their experiences are going to be so varied. Even if you are somebody with lived experience or from a marginalised background, there might be some similarities in your journey or your experience, but, and you can empathise with that. No one's going to have the exact same experience or exposure that you've had. So that the power of pause, I really love that. Yeah. Thinking about in terms of engagement surveys, so that's always a tool at the moment that's very popular to kind of measure the sense of psychological safety. And it's great to see that this is, a step that some organisations are taking. But if we move beyond engagement surveys, what are some of the things that leaders can do to actually notice the sense of psychological safety in people's language and behaviour and culture?
I love this question. Safety is felt.
Yes.
It's a felt sense before you can measure it. And so leaders can, like you were just kind of saying in relation to the parenting and the attunement, what we would say is attunement. Leaders can learn these skills. Leaders can learn, anyone can learn to attune to others. And we're going to be, and when I say that, it means being able to look for cues in behaviour and presentation without getting, here I am kind of finding the nuance already, but without getting too lost in hypervigilant. Yes. What does that look mean?
Yes.
But just a general understanding that people's safety is going to turn up in how they move and speak and engage. So do people openly disagree? Or do they wait until after the meeting? When something goes wrong, do people seek for the learning or for the blame? And are people using I statements to own whatever it is?
Yes.
Or like a bit of a general statement around people feel, I've heard that, or we might. So So kind of just subtle things in language. We can look at how humour is used, how often credit is shared, and if junior staff or marginalised staff folks ever lead conversations or even interject. These are the micro signals that kind of flag elements of psychological safety or not, and a felt sense of safety, because safety lives in our bodies and our nervous systems. They run the show, right? It's how bodies relax or not. It's how voices sound. And if we're making, and then moving from the body into maybe the team, how mistakes are kind of, I guess, metabolized in the team, how we move through them. So, leaders can notice safety by paying attention, by being observant, by taking a genuine interest in what they're seeing, slowing a little bit. Surveys sound great because, people have time to think about it and it can be anonymous. Sometimes people worry about whether it is or isn't. But if you just look around and feel, if you can be in your own body, you get a greater sense of being able to attune to other bodies around you. You walk down the hall, you can kind of notice people's regulatory systems a bit more. So it's such an important question because surveys are just one dimension. It's, also figuring out how much people pleasing is happening. This workplace fawning element, and how much laughter and critique could coexist in a team. Can we move through having robust debates where we're kind of on edge of like strong opinions, but then move into something light? These are the kind of markers of health, the health of safety.
I think that the markers, indicators that you've just shared, those kind of subtle things that it's amazing our brain is actually picking all of these things up. It's just whether or not we're actually attuning and being attuned to them. So thank you for sharing that. And I think it's interesting. I think it also kind of comes back to there's opportunities to build in that self-reflective practice that's so often, in team meetings and but also if you do self-reflect and you feel like you've got it wrong, go back. Go back and say, you know what, actually, I left last week's meeting feeling a bit like this. Did anyone have that sense? What is it that we could do to try and improve that in future? Or, if it's more a one-to-one conversation, like you came to me yesterday and I felt a bit distracted because of this. I'm really sorry. I have some time now. Would you like to have that conversation? Because as you said, we're human. Like we're not going to have those perfect moments all the time where, we are 100% present. But certainly when we notice those things, and our bodies notice it and pick it up. And I think if we don't react, that's where, from a health perspective, if we don't respond and try and be attuned to that, we carry it a whole lot more.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got great compassion for leaders balancing multiple demands. This idea of bottom line stuff and get the productivity measures ticked off. And I often hear, how do we do that? And the people stuff too. And like you mentioned before, like the people stuff will get the productivity done.
Exactly.
And so that, leaders, while having maybe that kind of knowledge and pressure even in the back of their minds about the deliverables, is really, this is worth taking time for.
It's, unfortunately, I think we've seen the silos of like, people, there's productivity, there's that bottom line, but I think it's the integration of both, and we often reproduce in our behaviour what we've seen come before us in terms of success. So if you're a leader in an organisation, you're probably adopting some of the behaviours and approaches that you've seen come before you, of course.
Yeah.
That's how we learn.
Yeah. Normal stuff.
But if that's how success is defined and rewarded, a lot of my work in kind of applying behavioural insights to gendered violence prevention is, reward and recognition structures in any workplace is going to motivate behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only recognising financial contributions at the end of the day, your policy might say, oh no, we recognise all of these types of things. In practice, you are only rewarding kind of particular behaviours. I've been in conversations where particular people are up on promotion, yet they've had multiple sexual harassment claims out against them. And it's like, okay, well, we can promote this person on paper, but, this is in conflict with, and we're often not rewarding the how people go about things. It's not just the outputs that they produce in a workplace, it's the how they go about producing those. I think that's a real missing point.
Yes.
Because, it's where I've seen, brilliant, or had the fortune of being exposed to, really brilliant leaders. It's that role modelling piece that, they've reflected on things, they've come back, they've owned their mistakes. They've said, I messed up, or I effed up, whatever.
Yeah.
And it feels really approachable. But even just I was really distracted because this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Like sometimes explaining the why, humanizes things for people as well, because, if I certainly don't want to suggest that, leaders aren't doing their best to try and grapple with some of these things. I think, there's a lot of stuff that comes out of being well-intentioned, but we also need to recognise that being well-intentioned sometimes can cause harm.
Yep, it can. Yep, and lose sight of impact. So,
yes.
Yeah, the humanity and the honesty. It makes me think I often find the parallels between a workplace and family systems work. A workplace is essentially not often thought about this way, but mirrors a family, of sorts, right? So leaders can represent that parent caregiver role and that layer, and essentially hold a kind of responsibility for the care and well-being of the humans in that system, just like a family. And yes, we could go on about that for days and draw many parallels, but that ability to turn up as a human and be humble and honest and own your stuff as a parent and as a leader, that shows people stuff. Yes.
That shows people you can be real, get it all right, but look at you trying, and here's where I want to head, and would you like to help me get there, and I can learn from you. And there's such richness in that honesty piece. I think the family dynamic there's so many parallels too, in terms of just the structures, but then I often hear, oh, we're a family here, and I was like, sometimes the few red flags go up for me when I hear that, like, oh, but we're a family here. And it's like, but, families are often...
Lots of families are dysfunctional.
Yeah. And that dysfunction exists on a spectrum. Like that's, but it can be really challenging. And even though there might be some really close personal relationships that exist in that workplace where people say we're just like a family, when something does go wrong, or if something, if there is a hard conversation to have, it can be there can be more barriers in place for people to be able to raise concerns or feel as though, can I be my whole self in this space? So really pleased that you brought up the family dynamic.
We'll save it for another.
Oh gosh, it's a whole episode. Really, last question for you before any kind of final reflections. But from your perspective, how does psychological safety intersect with power? So in terms of who's able to speak up and who bears the cost of doing so. And we've touched a little bit, we've skirted around the edges of this in terms of talking about lived experience and marginalised folk. But what does that intersection look like, and how have you seen that unfold?
Yeah, it's really the heart of it. It's really at the heart of it. Psychological safety is often kind of presented as though it's a universal condition, like we all have equal access.
Yes.
But in reality, it's unequally distributed, right? So the cost of truth telling, and that includes things like turning up as you are, you know, that's your truth, whether it's a verbal disclosure or just you being. The cost of truth telling is, I'm going to say a strong word, but always higher. I know we shouldn't say always or never, but always higher for those with less structural power.
Yes.
Whether that be, junior staff, people of colour, women, queer folk, lived experience. It's the layers of power like so present in those intersectionalities of difference. When folks speak up from those places, there's greater risk. There's greater and less real or perceived safety, and structural safety too. You know, they risk being labelled things like being difficult or too emotional or unprofessional or problematic. And so sometimes then in that case, that's a barrier, right? And so silence might feel safer. Silence is, the cost of safety. So in terms of the power usage, I really believe that leaders have a strong responsibility in terms of how they use their power relationally and really, if you like, kind of absorb some of that cost and make greater effort to bridge, you know, that gap and the scales of difference. It's true psychological safety is not just, you know, offering the freedom to speak. It's the safety that when you do speak, you can be heard without consequence, or that as in the same level of consequence, and of accessing safety.
Yes.
And so for marginalized people, safety can often, or it needs to mean not having to be the whistleblower to be heard.
Yes.
That you can approach any other person, in power or not, and be believed and heard, and not further discriminated against because you're sharing.
Yes. Yeah.
It makes me also then think of this role of community, which we speak a lot about in domestic family violence and sexual violence arenas, around the role and responsibility of community in calling out safety, or calling out, bad, harmful behaviour and discrimination, and that it's not just up to the victim survivor or the person experiencing harm. And so in that way also we can kind of work on closing the gap between power discrepancies for those who feel safe to open up and share, those who hold power to, sit back and wait for information to come to them too, that all folks have a role to play, all colleagues, all leaders have a role to play in supporting, naming and listening.
Yeah, no, I think the recognizing that positional power and that power can change, you know, like you might experience marginalization but still hold, you know, positional power in different contexts. And I think it's, you know, what are some of the hats or the experiences that you might be carrying at that point, where, you know, you might be in a position where you have more safety and security to raise concerns than somebody else. But it's also, as you just said, a real privilege to be able to sit back and wait for information to come to you. And, you know, the biggest bugbear now is that, I didn't know that was happening. Okay, well, we know the statistics of what this looks like.
Right.
I think we've heard we should have heard enough personal experiences and case studies and from people with lived experience to know that this is affecting far too many people.
Absolutely.
So if I hear, I didn't know, you weren't looking for it. You are in that context of privilege where you can just go, I don't want to know about it. Yeah, it's going to interrupt my day if I'm proactive, or if I am starting to be more attuned and notice the small behaviours and that feeling of, how was it actually, like for me, but also for others when I was making coffee in the kitchen?
Yeah.
Was there a little hush was, that before I entered the room? Because that's a really concerning indicator. That perhaps people aren't necessarily feeling safe. So, thank you for the unpacking that kind of power dynamic a little bit. And unfortunately, when we see that it reinforces silence, it just reinforces that power dynamic again and again. And
if we're talking about folks with a lived experience of trauma, violence or abuse from before they entered the workforce or in the workforce or from the workplace, it replicates and perpetuates that sense of victimhood, like powerlessness. Yes, the perpetration feels like it's right there again. And yes, it's in my workplace. Here it is turning up, and so the sense of power, misuse, and abuse that that person may have received will inherently make it incredibly challenging, not impossible, with certainly different stages and spurts of growth and recovery and healing, but really very acutely aware of power when it comes to speaking up and, sharing or seeking help. Or it's double layered, folks with the lived experience. And leaders are not immune to. Leaders may have stats, show all of it, no one's immune. They may have their own lived experience of all sorts of traumas and abuses and violence. So in that way, I guess I would appeal to their lived experience and say, you may know what this is like in your own way, but remember, if you can safely touch on that, remember that sense of what it's like to feel a little powerless. What can you now do to help bridge that? Yeah, thank you. We could talk about forever. But are there any final thoughts or reflections that you just want to share before we wrap up? It's just been a great conversation, and yes, there's lots of places we could go with it. I'm really invested in people having voice, and so I just think, the greatest gift you can give people is time and respect in that. So finding maybe ways to genuinely listen to people's voice, or have voice become present and activated in your workplace, or just your day-to-day and how you're moseying about being a leader. I guess my curious question when I think about, what else is missing, is what can organizations learn from the people who don't speak up, or the people who have left or moved on quietly. And in that, that's a reflection on the use of voice too. People may exit, and then, workplaces may just get on with things, and they do, of course. But I would invite, if there could be a little research project in workplaces, to just grab a student and make a research project and be like, well, what are we learning from the folks who are leaving? What can we learn there? There's this sense of there could be such wisdom in that silence and unspoken peace.
I think you've left us with a beautiful way to kind of end on, in terms of how can we facilitate more opportunities to hear all voices
What can we do more proactively to reach those that are less likely or have been less engaged in terms of sharing their insights? And yeah, it's not just about who's coming into the organisation, it's who's leaving as well, and what can we learn from them. So thank you so much for your time. It's been a wonderful chat. And no, it's been brilliant. Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you, Jen, for that thoughtful conversation. The insights discussed today about the connection between creating psychological safety and effective prevention practice are invaluable. What I hope you're taking away from this episode is that psychological safety isn't a soft skill or a nice to have. It's a crucial aspect of effective leadership. It's foundational to creating workplaces where harassment can be named, challenged, and ultimately prevented. When people feel safe to speak up, when they trust they'll be heard and supported, that's when real change becomes possible. In our next episode, we'll shift from building safety to taking action. We'll explore how to recognize harassment, especially when it's targeting someone different from yourself, and how to move from being a bystander to becoming an active bystander. See you then.